There are many injustices within the United States. Here we will discuss a few that we see today. As citizens of the United States, our rights are to be protected by the Constitution. While these rights do still hold precedence, there are many ways in which they are undermined. In our class, we focused on the First Amendment and the rights it grants us. The Trial of the Chicago Seven is a documentary which shows a real-life example of our First Amendment rights being denied by those in charge. When people had asked for a safe place to peacefully protest, they were told not to assemble. The protesters had exercised their right and still assembled and were violently dispersed by law enforcement. The very people that we elect to serve us and protect us are the ones who take away our rights and silence our voices. We still see this today through the Black Lives Matter protests and how their peaceful protests violently ended by officials who are trying to silence the people. The media is a big deal in terms of how different events are displayed to the public. In the documentary, This Is What Democracy Looks Like, there is another example of people's First Amendment rights being violated through forceful dispersion of peaceful protesters. The officials who had violently broken up the protest were aware that if the media had portrayed what really happened, the people of the United States would not be happy, so they lied and tried to cover up as much of their wrongdoing as they could. In today's world, through social media, we have seen more and more of the truth through people's own recordings of events and how they truly happen. This is great in bringing the injustices that American citizens face to light. If more people are made aware of how our rights are undermined and how justice within the United States is seldom upheld, we as a united people can make a change. Our First Amendment rights are also undermined through censorship on many levels. When the media silences one version of a story, they are taking away someone's voice. In our class, we focused on banned books in the United States as well. This is a form of censorship which may not seem like a big deal, but if we can be censored in this way, we can be censored in any way. There are hundreds of books that are banned or challenged each year. They are removed from the shelves because of a few people's interpretations, which are enough to take away someone's voice, which could enrich so many other people in their own interpretations. We, as citizens of the United States, cannot be silenced. We must stand up against any injustice and exercise our rights to the fullest extent. There are other injustices that affect people everywhere. Inequalities are another example of unjust treatment of people all around the world.
Gender norms are rules that apply differently to men and women dictating expected behaviors. They are based on power relations and traditional views of roles and positions of men and women in society. They shape social attitudes, behaviors, and practices, affect laws and policies, and prevent changes in education. For instance, one common view is that women's primary role is to be wives, housewives, and caregivers. Such views influence education in several ways, including how boys and girls view school. Many nations' traditional values revolve around that theory, and the theory that when a woman works for pay, her children suffer. The idea is widespread in India and in other Western nations, and remains the center of their ideology today. Nations that carry these ideals tend to be less developed and not economically stable. The fact that 76% of American teachers are women is, according to economists, a big part of why the profession as a whole is underpaid. Professions dominated by women tend to get disrespected and undervalued. The good news is that the gender pay gap in education is relatively smaller compared to others. This is because nearly 9 out of 10 public K-12 teachers are paid according to a strict salary schedule. Women who teach elementary school make 91 cents on the dollar compared to their male colleagues, and women who teach secondary school fare a little better with 94 cents on the dollar. These numbers came from a study from the Institute of Women's Policy and Research. Yes, so 89% of us work in schools where salary schedule, where there is a salary schedule of some kind, but 33 US states don't have statewide teacher salaries. They have, in 17 states, legislated a statewide standard. The schedules are often just minimums, and this means that local districts can expand upon the salary schedule if they want to or if they can afford to. In short, flexibility allows for differences, both legitimate and based on bias or other factors like location. Child domestic workers are among the most vulnerable to exclusion from education. In 2012, around 17.2 million children and adolescents aged 5 to 17 were in paid or underpaid domestic workers in an employee's home. Two-thirds of them are girls. Protecting child domestic workers requires various policies and interventions, including protecting their rights to education via awareness campaigns, ensuring high quality public education and social protection, and carrying out interventions to curb child labor and prevent entry into hazardous work conditions. This applies particularly to poor rural girls who migrate to cities out of poverty, often unaccompanied, and end up working in domestic work and see their education opportunities compromised. Achieving gender equality and equal access in education will not occur without a strong political commitment at the institutional level. The persistence of discrimination in social institutions inevitably permeates educational systems, including tacit understanding of what may be acceptable in curricula and textbooks. Abolition of the discriminatory laws is critical given the backlash against gender equality observed in many countries and regions. So basically, children aren't being given the same opportunity and they're turning towards other means of survival.
Crime and punishment. How many are incarcerated? An era of mass incarceration in the United States, starting in the 1980s with a war on drugs initiative and tough on crime policies from federal lawmakers, skyrocketed the population of incarcerated individuals to today's number of almost 2.3 million people in 1,833 state prisons, 110 federal prisons, 1,772 juvenile correction facilities, 3,134 local jails, 218 immigration detention facilities, and 80 Indian country jails, as well as in military prisons, civil commitment centers, state psychiatric hospitals, and prisons in the US territories. The United States continues to have the highest prison population in the world in 2020 and held 28% of the world's prison population in 2015, though the US only makes up about 4.4% of the world's population in 2015. So who was incarcerated and why? According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, 35% of American prisoners were white, 38% were Black, and 21% were Hispanic in 2014. Native Americans and Asians make up a very small population of the prison percentage, so I have not included them. It is also reported that in 12 states, more than half the prison population is Black. The total population of Black people in the United States is 13.4%, so the population percentage of those that are incarcerated is especially concerning and is a startling fact. Drug offenses are criminalized heavily, resulting in many individuals behind bars for a very minor and nonviolent crime. Analyzing youth in confinement also shows some disturbing facts. Out of the 44,000 youths in confinement, there are over 6,600 youth behind bars for technical violations of their probation rather than for a new offense, as well as 1,700 youths locked up for status offenses, behaviors that are not law violations for adults, such as running away, truancy, and incorrigibility. About 1 in 10 youths are being held in an adult jail or prison. In addition, 470,000 individuals are behind bars when they have not yet been convicted of a crime. So some of the most startling, in my opinion, of the facts here in this pie chart are that the population of people in prison for drug offenses, non-convictions, youths, of course, and immigration detention. Clinton Correctional Facility has a complicated history and fits perfectly into the prison industrial complex and its impact on New York and New York system as a whole. Clinton Correctional Facility, also known as Dannemora Prison, and more infamously referred to as Little Siberia, is the largest maximum security prison in New York. As of 2020, according to a PREA audit report, the inmate population is 2,248, consisting entirely of males, and there are 1,352 staff members. Before the 2008 repeal of the death penalty in New York, the prison housed death row for men. The prison has a history of violence against inmates by officers. According to an article published by North Country Public Radio in the 1990s, the New York Times reported that state officials had settled 10 brutality cases brought by inmates against Dannemora's guards over a 5-year period. Governor Andrew Cuomo has also been quoted stating that this is the prison that they would threaten the other inmates and the rest of the system, that if you didn't behave, you would go to Dannemora. In 2010, a violent encounter between a mentally ill inmate, Leonard Strickland, and officers was reported, resulting in the man's death after suffering from extensive injuries. Some really good resources on mass incarceration. Netflix's documentary 13th, published in 2016, a film by Ava DuVernay, explores the intersection of race, justice, and mass incarceration in the United States. It analyzes the Jim Crow era, war on drugs, and the prison industrial complex with interviews and testimonials from many influential individuals. Just Mercy, published in 2019, a film directed by Destin Daniel Cretton, depicts a dramatic retelling of a true event between two African-American males, a young Harvard Law graduate representing a death row inmate in Alabama falsely convicted of a crime he did not commit. The Correctional Association of New York's website provides resources on the New York prison system and advocacy to those that are incarcerated in New York.